Hi everyone, welcome to the TriEssence martial art channel. Hope everyone is still doing okay. I mean, okay now is kind of like a relative term, so hopefully you guys are doing better than South Africa at least. You know, wherever you are, hopefully your government is more competent than here. So this will be Fact or Fiction, episode 8, part 3, the final part on the topic which is my grandmaster in Tai Chi, grandmaster Shi Ming. In the first part, we basically talk about his lineage, where he learned his Tai Chi from, where my master fit in, where I fit in, and the social dynamics of his lineage. And in the last video, which is the part 2, we basically talked about his controversial demos of no touching Lin Kong Jin and other kind of forces that he demonstrated which doesn't look real. We've talked about what part can be real, what part is real, and what part isn't real. So by now I hope you have a better understanding on the woo-woo or the chi snake oil aspect of Tai Chi and have a better understanding of how that works, and hopefully that in your own training and in the near future you wouldn't be a victim to false masters that sell you these things as genuine self-defense techniques or abilities. But at the same time, I also hope that you wouldn't discredit these things completely and do see the value, however little, that it holds within the grand picture of Tai Chi practice. Now, like I said in the last video, that despite all these issues that people have with Shi Ming's demo of Tai Chi, he does have genuine abilities, right? He does impress genuine practitioners of Tai Chi within the Beijing martial art community. And in this episode, we're gonna take a look at what are his actual qualities or abilities that works on everyone, not just those selected people who are sensitive to Qi, so to speak. Okay, firstly, we're gonna continue watching the video, and then we're gonna talk about it as we go along. So now we've talked about all the fake stuff, so to speak. I mean, it's not really fake in the sense that the students are not faking the response, but it's not real because it doesn't work on everyone. So now that we're done talking about that, let's discuss what's real about Grandmaster Shi Ming, because he has a very big reputation in the Beijing martial arts circle. Like I said in the last video, even Wu Bin, right, the head of the Beijing Wushu team, one of the most powerful figure in the martial arts scene in China, the coach for Jet Li and many other champions, national champions. He sent his own daughter to train with my grandmaster for many years. Why would he do that if all my master can do is politics, so to speak? Wu Bin knows all the Tai Chi masters at the time in Beijing, right? Whether it's Feng Zhiqiang from the Chen style, Li Bingci from Wu style, Wang Peisheng. He knows everyone. He's highly connected. Okay, Wu Tunan. He knows like all of them, but he particularly sent his daughter to Shi Ming. So firstly, it could be that Wu Bin is also sensitive to these kind of things. We don't know that for sure. Unfortunately, it could be that, or that he actually knows that Shi Ming is got real stuff as well. That's why he sent his daughter there for many years, hoping that she can then kind of pry it out of him, and then be. I would say he is actually curious to know. That's why he sent his own daughter. So what exactly is real with Grandmaster Shi? So basically, I've spoken to people, not my master, because obviously if I speak to my master, the answer I get is not 100% trustworthy, because when you are a disciple, you tend to say good things about your master. I've spoken to other people who are not disciples of Shi Ming, but people who are almost like peers. They used to do Bushan together, and some of them, like this one particular guy that I spoke to, he doesn't like Shi Ming because he actually thinks Shi Ming is like not a nice person, because every time he tries to ask Shi Ming how he does something, Shi Ming never exposes it to him. To me, that's perfectly understandable, because why would he want to teach him if he's not his disciple? And a lot of time in Chinese martial art world, if someone teach somebody else something, the guy will turn around and say he learned it from his own master. So that's why in the Chinese martial art community, we don't really share knowledge to people outside our lineage. But he's upset with Shi Ming because of that. He's saying that he knows Shi Ming for many years. Shi Ming should have told him the secret. So the guy doesn't necessarily. What I'm saying is that he doesn't like Shi Ming, so he doesn't have to say good things about him. However, when asked about the skill of Shi Ming, he says that Shi Ming is the best Tai Chi guy he's ever came across, and he basically travels around all the kind of parks in Beijing. And this kind of fits with what I hear about Shi Ming doing push-hand with with all kind of groups around Beijing's parks before he came to settle down in the Pro Bamboo Park to start teaching. He first went out to test his skill. And this guy basically met him while he was doing that, and he believed that he's one of the best. Obviously, you can't take his word for 100%, so maybe he's not the best, but definitely he's among the top. According to him, Shi Ming is among the top. And I asked him but what makes Shi Ming impressive? The first thing he said is that Shi Ming can let you either whether it's pushing him on his hand, on his wrist, or pushing on his chest. He'll basically let you apply force to him. And he can basically hold that force, and at the same time, if he's pushing on the chest or on the hand, his other limbs, including the two legs, are free to move. So most of the time, when two people collide forces, right, they basically need to root on the ground to be able to withstand force, and they can't actually move freely. But the way Shi Ming does it is he can let someone apply full force to him, and he can lift his back foot, he can lift his front foot, he can start walking forward and the guy will just move back. His legs are not hindered by the force someone applied to him. Now this is important because, for example, like in Chen Wang's demo, right, where someone pushes him, he roots down and he resists that force. We're going to talk about that in a later episode. He actually does tricks on his hand too. But let's just talk about the legs so far. But you can resist the force, okay, but what can you do with it? Nothing. Okay, you basically in a stalemate. You can't do something back to the guy. So that's actually not practical. It's not even. It may have a little bit of purpose in testing your stance structure, but very little at that. In a real situation, you want to move about. If you can withstand some of these force and still stay forward, that gives you the opportunity to put him off balance and to hit him at the same time because you're closing in the distance. If you can only stand where you are, the guy can just simply retrieve back, and then you can't follow forward because you're all rooted. So that's the first thing that the guy was highly impressed with Shi Ming, is his ability to do that. And over here we have a video clip of him showing it to a private crowd of people who came to visit him, I think in the 90s, from Australia. It's like a group of Tai Chi enthusiasts. I know some of them from Australia, some of them maybe from other places, Malaysia or Singapore, somewhere like that. But yeah, this basically is one of the rare videos where he actually shows it. He doesn't show this in front of a mass crowd or outsiders. He was only showing it here because these are Tai Chi practitioners. He wanted to impress them with real skill, not the no touch stuff.
冇电了。我这脚是可以起来的，这样顶着，这个脚可以到，这后脚不是动的。但是我有一转胯身，后脚可以起的。可以了。可以，这样我顶着没起完没法起啊，顶上折劲。这是我这个脚可以动，这劲儿到不了这个脚上去啊。我另外一個俾推出嚟度。必須得到這個。邊度先？唔係度。
So as you can see from that video, well, maybe you can't see it clearly, but to me it's kind of obvious that the guy is actually pushing as much as he can, and grandmaster Shi actually told him 使劲 means to give all the force he can. So that one definitely is not a case where the guy is being sensing the force and is not actually going full out. He's actually pushing full out. But you can see that grandmaster Shi was able to overcome that force relatively easy. As for the reaction of the guy, where he's I think his upper spine kind of bulged first. That's just the problem in his structure. Okay, that's not him being sensitive. It's just that the way he's using his structure, the force kind of breaks at that point, which is why that part moves back, right? Depending on how the person's structure is, like that's why if I push my muscle and get pushed back, my feet goes up because I don't have a breakage in my structure. So that's one of the rare cases where Shi Ming actually shows genuine skill. Another thing that guy who told me about Shi Ming said that he was impressed with Shi Ming's ability to basically hit somebody's hand or arm and somehow make the guy dizzy on the head. So that's basically a kind of like a shocking force. Now that's not exclusive to Grandmaster Shi Ming or to Tai Chi. Yiquan has it, or Wuxing Tongbei has it. It's pretty much something that a lot of the good internal martial arts, good practitioners of authentic internal martial art, they all possess this ability. The guy told me that Shi Ming's one is actually quite severe, or he can create a lot of damage from it. So how much damage you can do depending on your own personal training, but this kind of phenomenon is not that rare. He said that once there was a guy who came to challenge Shi Ming, and initially, Shi Ming was going easy on him, then suddenly the guy was trying to use his body weight almost like a sumo kind of way to try to push him off a ledge or something. That's when Shi Ming got upset, and he basically did what this guy said, and the guy basically just the next moment the guy just kind of crouched down holding his head, and he just felt that his head was uncomfortable, his neck was sore, and his head was dizzy basically. So that is another thing that he can basically apply force to somebody's forearm and then shock the head and make the person's neck almost like a whiplash, so to speak. And he also have a similar thing where he basically almost like touch the guy's neck here, and then the guy will basically almost like blank out for a moment. That's when he only talked about it. I can't really get any confirmation, so I can't really comment on that. And lastly, he said that Shi Ming can have people do joint lock on him and not be able to do anything. Like he will give you his arm, you can try to bend this way, bend it that way, but either way you bend it, you end up being the one that is losing balance, and rather than affecting his joint and causing pain. So according to that guy, these are the real stuff that Shi Ming has. Obviously, these are probably the things that he show people. It's more like from an observer's perspective. If you watch my video on the separation of yin and yang, right, it's called The Secret Behind Tai Chi. I've also explained that if you understand separation of yin and yang, then you can let somebody put you in a joint lock, and then you can resist most of the people unless they are massively stronger than you. Otherwise, you can basically let people not able to apply joint lock on you. That's again, it's not something that is high level. It's just something that common people who were not part of the system, they don't understand how it is done. According to my old master, what really makes Shi Ming good, again, he does comment on the fact that he can resist someone and move his feet however he wants. So that's something my master also talks about. And other than that, it's basically, my master believe in that the higher level you go in Tai Chi, the less obvious your force are. I talked about this in the episode with Wu Tunan, where my master actually said that Wu Tunan was at a higher level than Shi Ming initially, and Shi Ming only caught up around the year 97, right, 3 years before he passed away. What that means is when Wu Tunan applied force to my master, he can't feel it until it's too late, until he's already been displaced. And he says that Shi Ming, initially the force was still there, he can feel it, he can't stop it. But towards 97, around that time, is when his force is almost untraceable, so to speak. Like you can't feel anything coming at you, but you get sent out. And keep in mind that as sensitive as my master is, and and people around that group like Xiao Weijia who can actually sense the empty force, so to speak. For them to not be able to feel a force coming at them before it's too late. So that is something that my master thinks is actually a high level of Shi Ming. So that's basically the difference in observation between someone from the outside and someone from within the lineage.
伸手知道就到这样，回来就回来，随便，很自如的。所以你拿不了我，你就这擒拿术啊，打太极啊，这你还合适了是吧？这谁合适啊？我谁拿谁？你看，哎，谁拿谁呀？
So here is a video of someone who, again, is from that group that came to visit him from Australia and Southeast Asia. It's basically one of them, Shimmy telling them to apply a lock, and you can see that whenever they apply a lock, they themselves loses their routine, right? They start tiptoeing and lose balance rather than affecting Grandmaster Shi Ming. Now in this particular video, I can't really say if the receiving guy is being sensitive or is genuine, right? I can't really tell. He could be just sensitive, but I do know for a fact that if I apply raw force to my master, it doesn't work either. In fact, if you check my video on the the secret behind Tai Chi, I've demonstrated on my partner, and also in my other videos, the earlier one, the introduction to authentic Tai Chi, I've also tried to do this to my Tai Chi brother Li Jin, and also it doesn't work. And over there, you can particularly see that I was using a lot of force, but still that doesn't work. Okay, so but in this video of Grandmaster Shi Ming, the other guy, I think he might be a bit sensitive to the force, and then that's why he's having that kind of response.
Try it one more time. Try to throw him. Millions of people are going to be watching, and I want to see you try to throw him. Really, this is for real. This is not a stunt.
No stunt, and I wouldn't be here to waste my time if it was a stunt. And we haven't done this in 2 years together, because the last time I did this with him, I got very hurt in my spine.
How long have you studied here?
I've been here now 4 years, studying with him every day. So if I can do what I'm doing now and affect him, upturn him, that means I've graduated to the next level and he would teach me something new.
All right, let's see.
So for me, it's very important that I do this, that I actually affect him.
All right, let's see it. Come on, Andrew, give it the old heave-ho.
Come on, Andrew, it doesn't look real.
So, you didn't do it.
No, not yet.
4 more years?
4 more years.
And over here, we can see the same thing, same idea applied to Andrew, right, the American student that was there during that video for filming. It's not a joint lock, but basically Andrew is attempting to do over the shoulders, like a judo throw, so to speak. Now I know that the people are going to be critiquing on his technique of not being correct. He's not in the right position, his hip is not there, and all of that. The guy's not doing a textbook judo throw. They are saying that he can do better. But at the same time, you also need to realize that maybe his hip is not in the place because he can't put it in place. Okay. So obviously, the argument there would be that when you do a judo throw, you first need to stress out your opponent, like you push him forward, like yank him, or try to do something else to destabilize him, and then you go into the throw. Like you got to set the throw up. It's just like you got to set a knockout punch up. Right? Everything needs to be set up. And yes, that is true. In a practical combat context. But over here, he's not trying to say that nobody can judo throw him. I'm pretty sure if I get his arm there and I suddenly elbow him in the face, and then I can judo throw him. So that's not the argument here. That we basically in this video is just showing how he can resist someone from pulling his body over the shoulder when he's not being stressed. In other places, when he's not being disorientated, when he's not being baited by a punch, when he's not being yanked with other forces, right? So this is more about showing structure and ability of the kind of force he can do, rather than whether or not a judo throw would work on him in a real fight. And the thing here to note is that Andrew is not leaning back on purpose to make it easy. It's actually because he can't get his hip in place. Because usually, right, if a guy holds out the arm, you hold this, and as you pull him forward, your hip get in place, and that basically bump him up, and then you throw him over. But the pulling and the hip need to kind of happen at the same time. But in this video, basically, Andrew can't actually pull Grandmaster Shi Ming's arm forward, and every time he tries to apply force, it actually creates a force that weighs on his shoulder, and that's why his hips can't get into position. I've also had people who tell me, maybe Shi Ming is just putting his hand on his butt or on his hips behind there, and that's what's making him not able to do that. I can tell you with certainty that is not what he's doing. If he's doing that, the two Americans on the side watching can clearly see, and then they will basically know that this is it's a trick. It's not some kind of structural force. Okay. And I've never done this particular thing with my master, but we've done similar stuff. And I do know that when in that kind of position, their body feel excessively heavier. Not that they finally gain weight, but due to the relaxed sinking force that they're able to apply. You see, I've explained this in my video on the secret behind Tai Chi, so you can actually check that for a better explanation. But in short, when you put a normal person, his muscle tense up, and in doing so kind of helps you to put the rest of his body up. But in this case, because all of these joints are extended and the muscles are relaxed, they're not actually they're not helping him to pull the person up. Instead, they're all weighing down on grandmother Shi Ming's spine, waist, and hip, which is at a position, right? If you're putting over here, the center mass is over here, and these parts are actually relaxed. And that's why it's much harder. It's almost like you try to yank a bag that has got a massive weight at the bottom, but the bag itself is loose. It's much harder to yank that over than if you have a solid object like this, and the moment you pull here, you can apply equal amount of force throughout the structure of that object. So that's what I believe is happening in this video. And of course, the explanation of him being able, if he can throw grandmother Shi Ming, then he can learn the next thing. If he can't, he has to do 3 more years. That I believe is purely to make the documentary sounds more interesting. There's no such thing or requirement in our lineage as far as I know. You're not judged on whether you can throw your master or affect him. That's not how it works. I don't know if Shi Ming actually lied to him about it, or he just said it to make the documentary more interesting. That I'm not very sure. Alright, so in this video, you basically see Grandmaster Shi Ming standing there, and you have a line of students pushing him. This is a very common trope in Tai Chi demonstration, right? Particularly famous people like Chen Xiaowang does it all the time, as well as many other Tai Chi people. If you go to those Tai Chi demos, this is one of the things. Chances are this is one of the things that you will see in almost every single demo. So there are a few problems with this kind of setup, right? Firstly, it gives you the illusional idea that maybe 10, 20 people, depending on how many people there are, is all pushing against the master. Whereas in actual fact, only the first person and the bit of the second person's force are actually transferred to the person that's resisting it. Everyone else is just there for visual effect. Okay, the reason I say that is because for the first person to push properly, he needs to have his own structural integrity, right? Means he has to be well balanced, standing in his position and then pushing. Even for the power of the next person to be transferred through him, it first had to cripple his own balance and structural integrity. So if he wants to fully transmit the power from the person behind him onto the guy in front of him, he will need to collapse almost into, or at least lean into the guy. And when he does that, sure, he's adding weight to the person resisting, but he's no longer actively pushing with strings. It's just some weight. And usually when you see in this demo, the first guy is actually standing quite well while pushing, and that would mean he's actually resisting the guy behind him while pushing forward. And that goes for every single guy thereafter. So essentially they're all pushing against each other for structural integrity, which is why I would say only the first person is exerting full force on the guy resisting, and the next guy maybe half of his force, and the rest is not exerting force at all. And often in these demos you will see that the moment the first guy is about to collapse and start leaning, the second guy starts leaning, and the third guy starts leaning, and when the force is overwhelmingly leaning into the guy resisting, especially in Chen Xiaowang's case, we'll talk in the later video, then he will just shift to the side and let them all fall to the side. That actually is not because he is showing how to deflect people. It's because he can't take that force anymore. The moment when everybody starts to power up on top of him, the weight becomes too much, and he had to quickly shift into the side and pretend that the show's finished. So that is the problem with this kind of setup. However, the one good thing that Shi Ming does here is that he's letting people holding his wrist, right, and not instead like Chen Xiaowang and the rest of them, they let people push them on the hips or the lower abdomen, which connect to the hip. The reason that is not good is because if you think of a person standing here, right? If you're pushing on somebody's lower abdomen to the hip height, directly, that means you're directly pushing the force into their legs. So if they adopt a low stance, especially a bow stance where the back leg is straight, more or less straight, that means you are literally pushing his leg directly into the ground. And of course, as long as he's holding his leg, which is not that hard, because it's bone, so you have to lock his knees, and then the weight all the force will be transferred to the ground. So it's almost like cheating. I mean, you can say it's a type of structure mechanic. The problem is though that what can you do with it, right? You can't do anything with it. But in reality, no one's gonna push you on the hips for any practical reasons. So while this can show that if you get pushed on the hip, you can direct it to the ground, but it has very little, if any, practical purpose. You're not gonna be able to use this in a fight. So it's more like a trickery to impress uninformed people, like, wow, this grandmaster can let 10 people push him. He must be really strong, internal power, magic. So that's the problem. So the good thing about Shi Ming's demo is that he's actually letting people push him by the wrist. Now, obviously, in real life, people are not gonna push you by the wrist either. At least not in a fighting scenario. I had people who try to shove me out the door that will do something similar to that, but they mostly will push the chest. But there are some who try to grab my wrist, but it's not really in a fighting capacity. However, what this shows, if you can do the kind of structure, is that you have an unbroken connection between your hand, wrist, all the way to your foot. And what this means is that if you can connect a force from your wrist all the way down to the ground without affecting your balance and structure, that means the connection is unbroken, which means I can also then in turn generate a force from the ground all the way back up into the hand to strike someone, right? So what this indicates is a proper connection through the whole body, rather than what you do when somebody grab your wrist and push you in a self-defense situation. So in this department, then Grandmaster Shi Ming is demonstrating a pretty good, better than me or anyone else that I know, that kind of body mechanic. Now, I've obviously never tried this with Grandmaster Shi Ming, but I have tried it with my own master, right? Which, if you look at my previous videos on demonstrating structure, I also use the same way to demonstrate, because that is how we, in our lineage, choose to demonstrate. It's a more practical approach on demonstrating structure rather than pushing hips or anything else to push the wrist or hand, because the tip, or what we call 末梢, right, the end of the branch, are the hardest to connect the rest of the body. It's far easier to let somebody push your body to, the closer you get to the root of your balance, the easier it is to withstand resistance. The further you get, the harder it is. But you have more joints that you have to calibrate and keep in structure. So that's why we like to demo stuff while holding the wrist. So I have done this on my master numerous times, and I outweigh him by quite a bit, but I can't move him back at all. Not even, his body doesn't even waver, it doesn't even twitch. He just solidly stands there, and I push him as hard as I can, and he doesn't budge at all. And he can do it without rooting to the ground, right? Just so you can see with Grandmaster Shi Ming's club, he's not like grounded, he's not in a low stance, he's actually quite a high stance. So this is not about lowering your weight balance or having a low stance to root. It's simply just connecting the structure so that majority of the force get redirected to the ground. So I can say this part is definitely genuine. Given my own experience with my own master, I can't budge him, and he can actually push me back while stepping. And you probably can see this in my video with my Tai Chi brother Li Jin, right? On the introduction to authentic Tai Chi, in there we also did a demo on this where I push him really hard and he doesn't budge. So this part of the demo is definitely real. However, the part where all the students clap forward and all bounces, all kind of falls back, now that obviously has to do with chi sensitivity. So if I were to do the same to Grandmaster Shi Ming, you will not see me going forward and then bouncing back. Not unless he makes a motion, right? In that video, he's not making any motion. He's just standing there, and the guys start coming forward and start to fall back. Given my experience with my own master, he can push me back. He can even bounce my feet up, but he need to have a motion. Not a huge motion, right? Not like you go do that. Not that kind of motion. But he would need to have some motion that generate power to send me back. So if you just think about sending a guy and the guy goes back, that is a phenomenon from chi sensitivity. It's not from actual physical mechanic. So that's the one part of this whole demo that is not 100% real. But other than that, I have no doubt that he can resist people in that manner. And obviously, it's only one person he's essentially resisting. The rest don't really count. Alright, so another question that some of you might be interested in is that, whether or not Shi Ming can fight. Now, I've already said this, that I've never met him in person, so I can't give any first-hand account on his ability in fighting, but I did speak to his past associate. And by associate, I don't mean his disciple as a student, because when you ask someone like that, they are personally invested, and the answer they give you might not be 100% factual, right? Because which is out of personal agenda or out of personal admiration. Usually when you ask a student or a disciple, they will say nicer things about their master, more exaggerated. So instead, I've found a few people who Shi Ming used to hang out with back in the days. Before he started teaching on his own, he had a few people that he met that are not from Wang Yongquan's lineage. They used to practice together and test out powers on each other and stumble around, before Shi Ming finally got that epiphany with Wang Yongquan and, reached a higher level. So I spoke to a couple of them about Shi Ming's ability. And I might first, say that some of them, right, don't actually like Shi Ming, especially the one, he actually hates Shi Ming to his gut. Because, after Shi Ming got the epiphany and became a lot better, he refused to share the secret with these people that he used to hang out with. Now, personally, I don't fault Shi Ming. That is how it is in the Chinese traditional martial art world. You don't share secret to people who are not your disciple, who are not part of your lineage. And sometimes even in this one lineage or branch, people still hold secret from each other, right? Just as you can see with Zhu Huaiyuan and Shi Ming. Well, Zhu Huaiyuan, all his disciples, including Shi Ming. So I don't fault Shi Ming for this, but some people do take it personal because they think, they used to hang out with Shi Ming, train together, help each other out before Shi Ming got good and famous. But once he did, he sort of just, ignores them and pretend they're not friends anymore and refuse to tell them how he got better. So some of them are quite offended by this. But even then, right, when I asked them about Shi Ming's ability, they all give pretty high praises to Shi Ming's ability. And when I asked them about whether Shi Ming can fight or not, they believe Shi Ming can fight. Now, you have to keep in mind that every person, when he makes his own judgment call, like, how good do I think someone is in terms of fighting, I'm judging that person based on my own understanding and my own ability. If someone who's better than me, then to me, he is good. And if someone who's a lot better than me, like my Wuxing Tongbei master, right, who beat me in one move, I would say he's very high level because it's way beyond of my own capability. So whether someone is good or not, from a personal opinion, it largely, depends on that person's own ability. So when these guys say Shi Ming can fight, it simply means that Shi Ming is better than them. It doesn't mean Shi Ming is, as a top level fighter. Exactly how good he is, unfortunately, we'll never know. But, judging from these people and the people that they've met, I can say that Shi Ming was probably one of the better fighters among the Tai Chi circle in Beijing, if not one of the best. But obviously, again, that's not too much because Tai Chi people are famous for not able to fight. So, Shi Ming being able to fight, it will naturally put him at the top, maybe, 1 percentile. I mean, do I think he can beat a modern, professional standard champion? I don't think so. But, that also have to do with his fighting experience and his, stamina training and all of that, which he didn't have. But his skill if you take his mechanic and skill and power generation, is certainly viable to use in a fight. But whether you can beat an actual professional, then that will largely hinges on your own professional training, right? To match up. What people often forget is that professional athletes are different to amateur and different to hobby, right? If you don't train in a professional capacity, you cannot compete with professional athletes. They share athleticism, they share physical capability, reflex response, all of that would just, be leagues ahead of anyone who's not trained in the professional capacity. So that's not really a fair comparison. But just to put things in perspective, I don't think Shi Ming is that highly trained in fighting, but he's better than most of the other Tai Chi practitioners in the Beijing martial arts circle. The one thing that you need to take note is that he doesn't actually fight with Tai Chi motion, according to the disease associate of his in the past. And that's perfectly understandable because, like I've mentioned before, the Yang family has lost its fighting understanding since Yang Chengfu. So anyone who came after Yang Chengfu, they don't know how to fight because Yang Chengfu himself didn't really fight. And obviously Shi Ming learned Tai Chi from Zhu Huaiyuan. Zhu Huaiyuan obviously didn't really fight in his life as far as I know, and didn't actually know how to fight. So naturally he can't teach Shi Ming how to fight with Tai Chi. Well, he didn't really teach Shi Ming much in any case. But so what Shi Ming does is he actually fights, according to these guys, using Ru Yi Tong Bei stuff. So he has the the Tong Bei hand mechanics and things like that, but he infused it with Tai Chi power. Now one of the problems with conventional Tong Bei, and by conventional I mean excluding Zhang Ce's Wu Xing Tong Bei, right? Every other Tong Bei that at least I've personally encountered, like Bai Yuan Tong Bei, Qi family Tong Bei, all of that. The common problem with these Tong Bei in general is the fact that they lack the ability to seriously injure someone. So they go after this kind of whip-like power in their strikes, right? And it stings, right? So if you get hit in the in your hand, in your arm, or even in your face, it stings. And obviously, if you get hit in the jaw, it stings too. But mostly it's a sting. It's like getting hit by a whip. It's painful, and the pain kind of seeps in. The problem is it doesn't stop someone from hurting you. So if I really want to hurt you for some reason, that kind of sting is not going to stop me. It's not going to discourage me from hurting you. And I can probably tank through most of those hits with enough adrenaline. That's one of the reasons why I started off training martial art with Bai Yuan Tong Bei, for those of you that don't know. That's one of the reasons why I eventually moved on to Yiquan, is because I found that Tong Bei lacks the stopping power, right? If you're using a modern term. When talking about firearm, there are firearms that have stopping power and firearms that don't have stopping power. Stopping power would refer to, if someone's charging at me, I take a shot at him, he's gonna get stopped dead on his track and possibly severely injured or maybe die. So the conventional Tong Bei lacks stopping power. So if you are in a friendly exchange, you're not trying to hurt each other, then the conventional Tong Bei seems quite decent because they're very fast, they have long distance strikes, and when you're playing around, you get slapped, you're like, that's quite so, I got slapped again. And you kind of, if you don't have the aggressive mentality, you think that guy's pretty good, it's better than you, in sparring. But the moment you have an aggressive mentality, like people have on the street, and you just like, stuff you, I'm just gonna hurt you, then those slaps is not gonna stop you from hurting them. I can tank them, get close, grab them, throw them, or punch them hard. So yeah, that's one of the problems with conventional Tong Bei. Obviously, Wu Xing Tong Bei is a different story, and that's why now I'm doing Wu Xing Tong Bei. But I've already talked about that in my Tong Bei video, so I'm not gonna go into details over here. So Shi Ming uses Tong Bei motions and techniques, if we call it that, but he infused it with Tai Chi force, which basically eliminates this problem of not having enough stop power. So he will hit people with Tong Bei move, but it will having Tai Chi power, which will either hurt the person badly or it will displace them. So this is almost like, if you think about power or generation or body mechanic in internal martial arts, almost like firearm, like a bullet, like fire gunpowder, right? Comparison to a bullet. Just having the bullet is not enough. If I give you a bullet without a gun, you can't do nothing with it. So that's the same thing with internal power. You can do stunt training like in Yiquan or whatever other style internal martial art you do, and you might have the mechanic, you have like structure. But if you don't have a delivery system to take this power or this bullet and put it into the other guy, it means nothing. So for Shi Ming, he didn't get a delivery system from Tai Chi because they didn't really know how anymore. So he uses Tong Bei as a delivery system for his Tai Chi power, right? If that makes sense. So that is how he used to fight, at least according to the people who used to know him from back in the days. Now, as far as Yang family Tai Chi's combat understanding is concerned, The only lineage that I know of today that might still have it is my 五行通背 lineage, right? Because Grandmaster Zhang Ce learned directly from Yang Banhou and Yang Jianhou, and after that, his lineage, they're still capable fighters in each generation, all the way up to my master, and hopefully, one day I'll take the mantle. So they are still capable of fighting with unbroken lineage from Yang Banhou, Yang Jianhou, all the way to now. So we can most likely see some resemblance of Yang family combat understanding from them. The problem there is obviously that, Grandmaster Zhang Ce, great Grandmaster Zhang Ce, he was first a Qi family Tongbei practitioner. So his although he did infuse Tai Chi principle with it, and thus made form 五行通背, which uses internal mechanics compared to the conventional Qi family Tongbei. But on the other hand, it goes both ways. Tai Chi influences Tongbei, his Tongbei then also influences Tai Chi. So his understanding on fighting is probably not pure Yang family Tai Chi understanding. But in given today's context, or what we have to work with, is probably is probably the best thing we've got. So at the later stage, right, when the lockdown is uplifted, I'm gonna talk a bit on how I think Yang family Tai Chi's stuff is used back in the days in fighting, based on the understanding from Zhang Ce's lineage as well as on my own interpretation. Hopefully we'll get a chance to make that video in the near future. So when I say that no one knows how to use Tai Chi to fight anymore, it's referring to people that fought from under Yang Chengfu, right? Any learning from Yang Chengfu, they don't know how to fight with Tai Chi. If they say they do, then they made it up. Obviously, not saying that everyone who made it up is completely wrong, but in this case, when you don't have an unbroken lineage, you kind of have to prove it, right? Fight for real. Maybe not against like professional, but at least fight competent people to prove that your understanding makes sense. You can't just say, okay, I've never fought, but I think you can fight like this. That doesn't work. Like if you never swim, you can't tell people how swimming works. Okay, so now that I've talked about other people's perspective on Grandmaster Shi Ming, I'm gonna talk about my own experience on my own master. Now I've never met Grandmaster Shi Ming like I mentioned in the previous video, so I can't really talk about that. But you see my master as a representative of Shi Ming's lineage. I think my experience with him will kind of also count a little. So the first week that I was there, like I say in my previous video, I didn't when the first day I went there, I didn't ask him to show anything on me, because that's kind of disrespectful. It does kind of give him the sense that I'm doubting his ability, and that in a way that's like a normal thing. Like when you go to someone's for anything, you first ask to for proof that he's actually skilled enough for you to learn. It's a very normal thing. When someone asks me that, I don't get upset about it. But in China, the culture is very different. So if you ask that from a master, chances are he doesn't get upset. So I didn't do that. So the first week, I basically took a leap of faith. I don't actually know how good he is. I kind of believed the guy who messaged me on the forum to go here, but I wasn't very sure. I think about a week or 2 weeks into my training there, it's the first time that he demonstrated something on me. Basically, he asked me to hold his two wrists and try to pin it down, in that space that his wrist is at. And he started to showing me the rotation of the hips and the shoulder and the spine and the waist. And he started yanking me around left, right, forward, and back. And I can't stop him at all. And he's fairly shorter than me, and he's a lot lighter, like I said, and he's old, right? He's not that old at the time, but he's older than me, and I did a lot of external martial art before that, and a lot of Yichuan, so I'm quite confident on my structure. But I couldn't hold him at all. It wasn't even a struggle. He was just yanking me back, forth, left, right, and that's the first thing that I realized that he's got some kind of strength or force that can overcome my force. And that's what the first confirmation I had about my master is worthy of me, studying under him. And I think like a month later, the one day he was in a good mood, I guess. It was just me, Li Jin, and somebody else. I think it was 3 of us or 2 of us. I can't remember exactly. I think it was just me and Li Jin. Yeah, it's only 2 of us. Everyone else was already left. It didn't come on that day. he showed us something where we hold down his wrist, and he asked us to to use force, and then all of a sudden it feels like his force is gone, and I'm like stepping forward. It's like almost like you walk, and then you step hollow, right? Either down a stair or it's like a hole in the ground, and you start leaning forward. And then at the split second I feel that my weight is leaning forward, another force hit me back up, and both my feet came off the ground, and I went back in a bounce, like da da da. I think about 3 times. And my body was completely stuck in that structure, right? Well, not my hand, but my body, like my body and my legs, and I can't do anything until the momentum dissipated. I bounced it 3 or 4 times, and then it stopped. And he did it to Li Jing, he did it to me again, and the second time I consciously tried to stop the bounce after the first bounce, and I couldn't. It's like you are sent on the momentum and just keep bouncing until the momentum wears out, which is about either 3 or 4 bounce. So this is a little similar to what Huang Zhenhuan in that video I played previously was doing, right? The guy also bounces, but obviously in that one he's like just supposedly sending energy to the guy's conscious or awareness. But in this case, I can actually feel my muscle emptying his force, drawing my balance in for a split second, and then when I'm off balance, then it hits so that I can actually bounce up. If he just send his force, then a lot of it would basically cancel out my own force, and I wouldn't be able to have that kind of reaction. He did it to each of us maybe 3 or 4 times, so I know that it wasn't a fluke, and it wasn't something I imagined up. It's really weird. That's the only time I felt something that weird. Like I was laughing because I was like, how does that work? I can't stop bouncing until the momentum wears off. But obviously, it only works if you have structure. Someone who doesn't have structure, they will just basically fall over and trip, right? It only works on people who can hold their body in one piece, and that's why you bounces. And then and then I went back to South Africa, and a couple of years later, when I went back, I asked him to demonstrate that again. He wasn't in the mood, and I've basically never experienced this from him again. But that one time, I experienced at least 3 or 4 times. So for me, it's pretty real. So that's like another side note on people who doubting why sometimes people bounce. But obviously, not all the bounces are the same. This one I believe is genuine. Is it practical? No, you can't bounce somebody in a fight. Is again there to show a type of force or structure or manipulation of force. Like you're able to dissipate the other guy's force, causing him to slightly lose balance. In a split second, you send your own force, and that causes him to go off balance. So that principle is practical, but bouncing somebody in a fight obviously is impractical. And then again, there are other people outside, from other lineages and stuff, who does Chi bounce, and those I believe doesn't work at all on people who are not sensitive. Now ever since I started to comment on the various Tai Chi forms and frames, where I say like there's no large frame, middle frame, small frame, there's just Tai Chi and there's not Tai Chi, I've had a lot of people who privately message me, show me clips of various Tai Chi masters, and ask me to comment on their frame, whether their form is good or not good. And naturally, some of them would ask me like what is a good form. Like for example, Thomas from my Patreon support, he wants to see a video of myself doing the Tai Chi form, so that he can get an understanding on what I consider as good. But obviously, I don't actually do the Tai Chi form in my lineage. Not that I don't know a Tai Chi form. I did Tai Chi form before I came to my Tai Chi master, my current one. Right, I know Chen style form and a Yang style form, but I'm not at the stage where I do form in my current Tai Chi lineage. Right? I'm still just doing Wuji stance, so I can't really show you how form is supposed to look like in my lineage at the moment. I remember I did have a video of my Tai Chi brother Li Jing when he came to visit me in South Africa. I did tape him doing form, but I can't find that video at the right of my hand. I'm gonna try look for it because it is a while back. And I'm gonna upload it onto my Patreon exclusive video collection. So my Patreon supporters, in the near future you'll be able to see that video. But in the meantime, I'm going to show you a short clip of grandmaster Shi Ming doing the form. This is also quite rare video footage as far as I believe. Not a lot of people have actually seen this. And so this is a simplified form, right? Simplified in the sense that not in the sense of mechanics or complexity in the body work and internal structure, but in the amount of motion it has. This form only has 37 motions, and that's because he takes out all the repetitive motions as well as some of the ones that he didn't find to be important. So it's more like a summarized confined form. So that's why it only has 37 motion. Now there is a common misunderstanding that if you do a simplified form, it is bad. Now that again depends on what are you simplifying. Are you simplifying the mechanics or are you simplifying the number of steps? Right, those two are completely different. Like I said before, if you have the 10 principles and other Tai Chi mechanics, even doing Wuji stance is a sufficient training in my lineage's understanding. So doing a 37-step form is not a bad thing at all. In fact, in my lineage, we either do 37 or 24, not the conventional 24 that the government standardized 24, and so our own version of 24 step. When we do a 37 over 24 in my lineage, like my Tai Chi brothers, they are required to do this form back to front repeatedly for at least 2 hours. So essentially, they are doing more motion than you would if you just do the 84 or the 108 step once, right? They actually do a lot more exercise training than someone who does the 108 step form once, because they actually have to repeat this for over 2 hours. And the amount of repetition that he gets, whether it's 37 or 24, doesn't matter, but the amount of repetition that he gets is actually a lot more promotion, right? Like say single whoop. The amount of time he does single whoop is also a lot more than someone who would do in one session of 108 step. And furthermore, single whoop is a motion that you actually repeat quite a few times in the single form, or the other motion that doesn't get repeated much, like Shan Tong Bei. I believe there's only 1 or 2 Shan Tong Bei, but in the way we train, Shan Tong Bei will be repeated just as many times as single whoop, just as many times as 手挥琵琶式, etc. So in a sense, it actually reinforces the singular motion training far better than doing a form 108 times. Now again, it's not saying people who does 108 step form is not training properly, but this is just our version of a more efficient way to train, right? You don't have to agree with this, you don't have to train with this, there are different ways to train reaching the same goal. But this is the reason why Grandmaster Shi Ming decided to do a 37 step rather than the full, the conventional 108 step or the Wang lineage's 老六路, right? All 6 roots. The reason he did away with that is because he is all about focusing your training on a few aspects rather than spreading them out and thin, right? From his invention on the Wuji stance to shortening the amount of steps you have, it all shows the same understanding, which is to cut off distractions and focus on the essential.
第一和section，
OK，
你可以录它。这是它这个基本
漂亮的小姐，
基本功法，
基本功法。
可能不行，我太瘦了，做不了。
就做这，
就随便做也可以。
一个武器装。
Now in this form, so I don't know if all of you can see what I'm seeing, right? So for people who are untrained in this department, you probably just see, you know, an old guy doing some weird motion. But for me, at least, I can see all the connections, right? The hip circle, waist circle, shoulder circle, how every motion just rotate into that and they connect. But these are internal connections; they are not external connections. But basically, from my understanding, I mean, I might be biased, I might not be. It's hard to say. I think I'm not biased, but obviously, I can't convince you that I'm not biased. But the way I understand this form, I can see internal connections between the joints, rather than if I take, you know, a conventional form that you find, you know, on the internet. They're just doing the motion, right? They're moving physically their limbs to a motion. Whereas over here, I can see the internal connection in various joints and bones and skeletons, and how that is the driven factor that, you know, dictate how the motion is moving. He's not simply doing aerobic exercises, right? He's actually moving everything according to a guideline from the skeletal structure. So for me, this form shows a lot about, you know, Grandmaster Shi Ming's ability. But obviously, I think if you're not well trained in this department of internal, it's probably hard for you to see. So you can either, you know, take my word for it or don't. It doesn't really matter. But this is basically my interpretation on Grandmaster Shi Ming's form. And then another thing that you should take note is that, how do I put it? There is, again, no difference between a large frame and a smaller frame, right? You know, Grandmaster Shi Ming isn't doing this to say that this is a small frame. It's just that when you reach his level, it no longer needs a large motion. You know, a smaller motion is already enough to form the internal connection. So, you know, the 37 step is basically summarized from Wang lineage's, you know, 06 route. And if you look at the 06 route, you know, the Wang Yongquan, you know, when he was demonstrating it in that club, he did a very large frame. But when we look at Zhu Huayuan, he did a smaller frame. And if you look at Shi Ming here, I think his frame is even smaller, taking even smaller steps. So this is a natural progression, like I keep saying, of understanding and, you know, elevation on the understanding of Tai Chi, rather than, you know, different forms that you learn at different stage, or like a secret form. It's not that. It's just your expression on the same form with a higher level of mechanic. Okay, so I believe I've covered everything that I want to cover on the practical side of Shi Ming's lineage of Tai Chi. Lastly, I'm just going to quickly talk about something that I forgot to mention in the previous video about our lineage generation. So basically, if Wang Yongquan is the 4th generation from Yang Luchan downwards, right? 4th generation. Zhu Huayuan is basically the 5th generation. That makes Shi Ming 6th generation if he wasn't expelled from the system. That makes my master 7th generation and us 8th generation, right? In Chinese, 8. So we're actually pretty low on the generation tree compared to other people. The reason I bring this up is because, you know, in responding to my previous video about, you know, the Michuan secret Yang style Tai Chi, you know, even though we're at a disadvantage in terms of generation, we don't try to, you know, to secretly move somebody out of the way and say, you know, Shi Ming learned from Wang Yongquan directly and therefore we are the one generation higher. We don't want to do that. And I don't see a reason to do that, because generation is only a number. It doesn't mean you're good or bad. I don't know why people are so focused on having better generation. In fact, one of the young family members alive today in China, the one from Taigu, I think, in Shanxi, basically the grandfather made the grandson go under him rather than his father, and they effectively skipped a generation. It makes him basically higher than anybody in his own age group, and possibly higher than people who are older than him. And for us, you know, that's like an asshole move. Not that I care, but it's just to show that that's like a bad thing to do. And for me, you know, generation only function in our own lineage. Like in my own lineage, then, you know, Shi Ming, the disciple, is my uncle, and I have to respect him to some degree. So that kind of works. But I will not respect someone from another Tai Chi lineage, even though it's all young family. If his generation is higher than me, I'm not gonna call him uncle. It doesn't really mean anything to me. If he's good, he's good. If he's not good, he's not good. So the moral of the story is, don't worry about the number. Worry about what you can do. Worry about your ability. That's way more important than anything else. Alright, so that's it for today. Hope you enjoyed the video. And if you do, please subscribe to YouTube channel so you can get my latest video update as soon as I upload them. And if you can, please support me on Patreon. That'll help me greatly in producing high quality videos on a consistent basis. Okay, lastly, I'd like to give a shout out to my new Patreon supporters, Robin, Thomas, and e-learning hero. And a special shout out to my new top contributor on Patreon, Ken. And also, another shout out to my other two top contributors on Patreon, which is Zachary and Chris. And also I always appreciate all my other Patreon supporters. I'm not going to mention all your names all the time, but I definitely appreciate everyone who supported me on Patreon, which helped me greatly. And so to the new supporters, welcome to my Patreon family. Like, if I message you with any questions, comment, or suggestions, you are welcome to message me at any time, and I will get back to you as soon as possible. Thank you for all your support. It's greatly appreciated, always. Now, some of my Patreon supporters have messaged me wanting me to go into more detail on the Wuji stance. Now, my stance on teaching online has not changed, right? I don't believe teaching online is a very viable, responsible way to pass on knowledge. But I will be making a video going a bit deeper into Wuji stance, not as an instructional video, but I'll basically just talk about it and explain how the Tai Chi principle, right, the 10 principles, can be practiced with Wuji stance. So I'm going to talk about this more when I make the video, but just know that it's not going to be teaching you how to do Wuji stance at home, but to maybe help you with a better understanding on Wuji stance. And this will be a Patreon exclusive video. Not that I'm trying to sell knowledge or sell training course, but the fact of the matter is, there are people who support me on Patreon, and I need to give them some benefit other than my normal YouTube viewers. Otherwise, it's unfair to people who support me. So I have to make exclusive videos for my Patreon supporters, and this Wuji stance will be one of them, right? Also because I don't want people to misuse this kind of information. This is purely just to share an understanding on how various Tai Chi principles can be seen on Wuji stance, rather than trying to teach people. But if it gets into the wrong hands, then people can then use this as a teaching material and potentially mislead a lot of students because they don't actually have the proper teaching. So I'm just gonna give you basically to say that this video will be coming in the near future. The moment I get a chance to make it, I'll be making it as my way to thank my Patreon supporters. Other than that, we're gonna continue with fact or fiction, hopefully on a regular basis next week. And next week, I'm going to be covering someone who's very, very famous and in recent years become very, very controversial. So stay tuned for next episode of Fact or Fiction. I hope you have enjoyed this video. And thanks for watching TriEssence Martial Arts channel. Stay safe, stay home if you can. And then I'll see you next time. Keep well.